A late-night scream, a twisted love triangle, and a master manipulator's dark web of lies. Discover the shocking case that stunned Taiwan in today's episode of True Crimes Unfold. Please note that events and scenarios in this video may be graphic for some viewers. Discretion is advised. Details of the videos are taken from actual case files. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're listening from, what type of cases you'd like us to cover next, and we'll make sure to add them to our list. And don't forget to subscribe to get new stories as soon as they're released. Now settle in, get ready, and let's begin. In the heart of southern Taiwan's bustling city of Kaohsiung, where neon lights flicker over crowded night markets, a blood-curdling scream pierced the midnight air, unraveling a chilling tale of obsession, manipulation, and a love triangle gone deadly. It was a night like any other in Kaohsiung, a city that never truly sleeps. But for one college student, the silence of her late-night studies was shattered at 4:40 a.m. by horrifying screams echoing from the apartment complex across the street. A man's voice, raw with terror, begged for mercy. Heart pounding, she froze. Was someone being attacked? Was she in danger? Grabbing her phone with trembling hands, she dialed the police, her eyes locked on the dimly lit window above a quiet music store. "Please, hurry! Someone is screaming for help," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the panic rising in her throat. Police arrived promptly, their sirens cutting through the night. They approached the music store, the only entrance to the apartments above, but found it locked and eerily silent. They rang the bell, knocked loudly, and even tried calling the shop's number. Nothing. Assuming it was a prank, or perhaps a drunken dispute now resolved, they left without further investigation. Little did they know, behind those locked doors, a sinister scene awaited. A scene they could have interrupted, possibly saving a life. As the sun climbed high, around noon, a frantic call came into the police station. A man named Mr. Tsai, a staff member at the music shop, reported a break-in. He claimed the owner's wife had called him, saying she was tied up during a robbery. When officers rushed back to the scene, they found Lin Yenyi, known simply as Lin, sitting alone on the first floor. Petite and disheveled, with eyes red from tears, she painted a picture of distress. "They took everything," she stammered. "They hurt him. My husband." But as detectives ascended to the fifth-floor residence above the shop, the true horror unveiled itself. The apartment was awash with water, pooling around their feet as they cautiously moved toward the bathroom. There, slumped in the bathtub, was Su Chie-heng, or Heng, Lin's husband, naked, bound with masking tape, and lifeless. His face was unrecognizable, swollen, bruised, a grotesque mask of purple and red. His mouth was stuffed with black underwear wrapped tightly with layers of tape. The brutality was unmistakable. Someone had unleashed a frenzy of violence upon him. Detectives noted the oddities immediately. Despite the vicious attack, the rest of the apartment was strangely tidy, almost as if someone had attempted to clean up. The walls and bathtub bore cracks, evidence of a violent struggle. Yet there were signs of a hurried attempt to erase what had transpired. Why would an intruder bother to tidy up? And how did they gain access without any signs of forced entry? As the questions mounted, so did the suspicion. Lin, the sole witness, recounted a harrowing story. She and Heng had returned home around 1 a.m. after a night out, enjoying drinks and music before retiring to bed. Both took sleeping pills, she claimed, to ensure a restful night. Around 4 a.m., Lin said she was jolted awake by sounds of a struggle. She found a large, red-haired man attacking her husband in the bathroom. Panicked, she pleaded with the assailant, offering money, anything to make him stop. "I told him I was pregnant," she sobbed. "I begged him to spare Heng for our baby's sake." According to Lin, the intruder forced her to fetch masking tape and cleaning supplies. Obediently, she descended 5 flights of stairs, twice, to retrieve them, supposedly under duress. The attacker then tied her hands with a silk scarf, and inexplicably, she fell asleep on the bed, not waking until hours later. Her story was riddled with inconsistencies. Why didn't she escape when she had the chance? Why wait 7 hours to call for help? And who falls asleep after witnessing such horror? Seasoned detectives sensed something was amiss. The lack of forced entry suggested the assailant was either let in or already inside. No valuables were taken. Heng's wallet and the cash register remained untouched. Moreover, Lin's description of the attacker, a tall, muscular man with red hair, seemed oddly theatrical. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras added to the mystery. At around 4 a.m., a figure was seen approaching the building. Clad in women's clothing, the person appeared to change attire before entering the shop, easily gaining access. Later, around noon, a man was captured, leaving the premises, wearing a cap and mask, carrying a bag, hardly the conspicuous red-haired giant Lin described. Digging deeper, investigators uncovered layers of complexity. Heng, a charismatic drum teacher, and Lin, a piano and cello instructor, had a tumultuous marriage. Neighbors reported frequent fights, and whispers of infidelity swirled around them. Heng had been sending money to a woman named Rong, a nurse he was allegedly involved with, a fact even his mother acknowledged. Meanwhile, Lin's behavior grew increasingly suspicious. Her phone records revealed a flurry of messages to a man named Wei, an English tutor from a remote area called Jiaotu. On the day of the murder, she had been in constant contact with him, even as detectives were at her home. When police tracked down Wei, they found a nervous, trembling man who quickly confessed to being at the scene. His initial story was fantastical. He claimed to be in a secret relationship with Heng, involving sex parties and substantial loans. But the evidence didn't support his tale. Under pressure, Wei changed his story. He admitted to being Lin's lover, ensnared by her tales of abuse and desperation. She painted Heng as a monster, and Wei, hopelessly infatuated, became her pawn. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, a chilling picture emerged. Lin had manipulated Wei, exploiting his naivety and affection. She fed him lies about her husband's alleged abuse, driving Wei to eliminate Heng. Evidence mounted against her. A search of her internet history uncovered damning queries. How to drown someone in a bathtub, sleeping pill overdose, inheritance laws, and more. She had meticulously planned every detail, intending to make Heng's death look like an accident. But when things didn't go as smoothly, the plan unraveled, leaving a trail leading straight back to her. This was no random act of violence. It was a calculated murder, orchestrated by a woman willing to manipulate and sacrifice anyone to achieve her ends. Lin's deceit knew no bounds, and Wei became both her weapon and her scapegoat. As investigators delved deeper into the gruesome murder of Su Chiehing, Lin Yanyi's fragile story began to crumble. Her inconsistent testimony and puzzling behavior led detectives to scrutinize every aspect of her account. Uncovering a web of deceit so intricate, it ensnared not just her lover Wei, but the entire investigation itself. From the moment Lin claimed her husband had been killed by a towering red-haired assailant, her story raised eyebrows. The inconsistencies in her timeline, her failure to call for help sooner, and her ability to calmly fall asleep after such a brutal scene made no sense. Detectives pressed her further, but Lin's responses grew more erratic. Her teary demeanor gave way to defensiveness, and at times, almost arrogance. "I did what I had to do to survive," she insisted, but if survival had been her priority, why didn't she escape when she had the chance? Surveillance footage continued to undermine her claims. The images of her figure entering the building in women's clothing, later leaving disguised as a man, bore no resemblance to the violent stranger she described. It became clear whoever had entered that night wasn't an unknown assailant. This was someone Lin knew and likely invited. The breakthrough came when police tracked down Wei, the nervous and timid English tutor from Kyoto. Wei was visibly shaken during his initial questioning, struggling to maintain eye contact and fumbling over his words. It didn't take long before he cracked under pressure, admitting his involvement. Wei's confession was a revelation. He admitted to being in a romantic relationship with Lin, who had convinced him that her husband Heng was abusive and controlling. Lin claimed she feared for her life and begged Wei to help her escape the marriage. "She told me she had no one else to turn to," Wei said, his voice trembling. "I thought I was saving her." Wei painted a picture of a woman who was as charming as she was cunning. Lin had spun a narrative of desperation, portraying herself as a victim trapped in a loveless and abusive marriage. Wei, smitten and gullible, believed every word. Lin claimed Heng regularly beat her, locked her in the apartment, and controlled her finances. She showed Wei bruises, which investigators later determined were self-inflicted or fabricated with makeup. Over the course of their affair, Lin convinced Wei to lend her money, claiming it was to pay off debts her husband had forced upon her. In reality, Lin used the funds to cover her personal expenses and maintain her double life. Lin's ultimate manipulation came when she began discussing plans to end her suffering. She suggested that the only way out was for Heng to be removed permanently, framing it as an act of liberation rather than murder. Wei, desperate to prove his love, agreed to help. Through Wei's confession and additional evidence, investigators pieced together the chilling events of that fateful night. Lin lured Heng home after a night out, ensuring he would take his usual sleeping pills, a crucial part of her plan. She messaged Wei, instructing him to arrive at 4 a.m., when Heng would be deeply asleep. Wei arrived in disguise, as instructed by Lin, to avoid being recognized on security cameras. Lin greeted him at the door, and together they entered the apartment. But when Wei tried to subdue Heng, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Heng awoke and fought back fiercely, shattering the illusion of Lin's carefully crafted plan. In the chaos, Wei resorted to suffocating Heng, using Lin's underwear and masking tape, while Lin stood by, directing his actions. Panicking after the murder, Lin attempted to clean the scene, instructing Wei to mop up blood and discard evidence. However, their efforts were rushed and clumsy, leaving behind telltale signs of their involvement. Detectives uncovered a mountain of evidence that tied Lin and Wei to the crime, dismantling Lin's claims of innocence. Lin's phone revealed chilling internet searches in the weeks leading up to the murder, including how to stage a robbery, how to overdose someone, and inheritance laws for surviving spouses. Investigators recovered encrypted messages between Lin and Wei, in which Lin laid out her plans and reassured Wei that everything would work out. In one particularly damning message, Lin wrote, "After this, we'll finally be free." Fingerprints matching Wei's were found on the masking tape and cleaning supplies, while DNA evidence placed both Wei and Lin at the scene during the time of the murder. As the weight of his actions sank in, Wei became consumed by guilt. He admitted that he had been manipulated by Lin, but did not absolve himself of responsibility. "I should have seen through her lies," Wei told investigators, "but I loved her. I believed her." Wei's heartfelt confession painted him as a tragic figure, an unwitting accomplice who had been used as a pawn in Lin's deadly scheme. His remorse stood in stark contrast to Lin's cold and calculating demeanor. Meanwhile, Lin's behavior grew increasingly erratic as the evidence against her mounted. She alternated between defiance and denial, maintaining her innocence despite overwhelming proof of her involvement. Lin attempted to shift all blame onto Wei, claiming he acted alone out of jealousy and obsession. However, her attempts to distance herself only made her appear more culpable. Throughout the investigation, Lin displayed little to no remorse for her actions. Detectives noted her focus was always on her own predicament, rather than the life she had taken or the devastation she had caused. Psychologists who evaluated Lin described her as manipulative and narcissistic, with a chilling ability to exploit others for her own gain. Her lack of empathy and tendency to view others as tools in her schemes made her a particularly dangerous figure. As the truth came to light, the full extent of Lin's betrayal became clear, not just to investigators, but to those who had once trusted her. Heng's family, who had welcomed Lin into their lives, struggled to reconcile the woman they knew with the cold-blooded killer revealed in court. Meanwhile, Wei's family grappled with the shame and heartbreak of his involvement. A kind-hearted but gullible man, Wei had been led astray by a woman who saw his love and trust as weapons to be used. When Lin Yanyi and Wei stood trial for the brutal murder of Su Che-heng, the courtroom transformed into a theater of high-stakes drama. The public watched with bated breath as sordid details of Lin's manipulation and Wei's tragic gullibility unraveled. The trial exposed not only the dark hearts of those involved, but also the societal flaws that enabled such a horrifying crime to occur. The prosecution wasted no time painting Lin as the cold-hearted mastermind behind the crime. Their narrative centered on her calculated exploitation of Wei's love and her ruthless ambition to rid herself of her husband. whose life stood in the way of her financial and personal freedom. Prosecutors highlighted Lynn's chilling internet search history, including terms like how to stage a robbery, lethal doses of drugs, and will inheritance laws in Taiwan. They introduced the encrypted messages between Lynn and Wei, showcasing her detailed instructions and reassurances to Wei that they would succeed. One message, in particular, sent chills through the courtroom. No one will miss him. Trust me. Bank records revealed that Lynn stood to inherit a substantial sum from Sue's life insurance policy, along with his savings and property. Prosecutors argued this was her primary motive for orchestrating the murder. Lynn's fingerprints on the cleaning supplies and her DNA on the tape used to bind Sue's body were undeniable proof of her active participation in the crime. Coupled with Wei's confession, the evidence painted a damning picture of Lynn's guilt. While Lynn's guilt seemed clear-cut, the defense painted Wei as a tragic figure, an unassuming man who fell victim to Lynn's manipulation. His lawyer argued that Wei's role in the murder stemmed not from malice, but from a misguided attempt to protect the woman he loved. Wei's defense team presented psychological evaluations that described him as naive and easily influenced. Experts testified that Wei suffered from low self-esteem and an overwhelming desire to please others, making him an ideal target for Lynn's manipulation. Wei's tearful testimony moved the courtroom. He admitted to his involvement but emphasized his regret and his belief at the time that he was saving Lynn from an abusive relationship. "I believed her," Wei said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was helping her escape a nightmare. I didn't realize I was part of one." The defense shifted much of the blame onto Lynn, portraying her as a cunning manipulator who had orchestrated every detail of the crime while using Wei as her pawn. Lynn's defense team took a different approach, attempting to deflect blame entirely onto Wei. Their strategy relied on portraying Lynn as a victim, both of Wei's obsession and her husband's supposed abuse. Lynn claimed she had no knowledge of Wei's plans to kill Sue, insisting that she had been coerced into silence by Wei after the murder. Her lawyers argued that Wei acted out of jealousy and unrequited love, framing Lynn as an unwilling participant. In a bid to garner sympathy, Lynn doubled down on her allegations of abuse against Sue, describing him as controlling and violent. However, these claims were contradicted by Sue's friends and family, who described him as a gentle and hard-working man. Lynn's lawyers attempted to discredit the forensic evidence, arguing that her fingerprints and DNA at the crime scene were circumstantial, as she lived in the apartment and had handled many of the items found there. The most poignant moments of the trial came from the victim's family. Sue's parents, visibly shaken, took the stand to describe their son's life and the devastation his death had caused. Sue's mother spoke through tears about her son's dedication to his family and his tireless efforts to provide for Lynn. "He worked so hard for her," she said, "and this is how she repaid him." Sue's father expressed his disbelief that Lynn, the woman they had welcomed into their family, could be capable of such cruelty. "She destroyed our family," he said. "She took everything from us." The family's testimonies underscored the gravity of the crime and the need for accountability. Their words resonated with the jury, adding an emotional weight to the prosecution's case. To provide further context for the jury, the prosecution called on psychologists who analyzed Lynn's behavior. Their testimony revealed chilling insights into her psyche. Experts described Lynn as exhibiting traits of narcissistic personality disorder, including a lack of empathy, a sense of entitlement, and a willingness to manipulate others for personal gain. Lynn's ability to exploit Wei's emotions and orchestrate the murder was indicative of a highly manipulative individual. She saw people as tools. One psychologist explained, Wei wasn't her lover. He was her instrument. Despite overwhelming evidence, Lynn maintained a detached demeanor throughout the trial, further highlighting her inability to comprehend the impact of her actions. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Lin Yanyi was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and fraud, earning her a life sentence without parole. Wei, while also found guilty of murder, was granted a reduced sentence of 20 years due to his cooperation with authorities and genuine remorse. The courtroom erupted in mixed emotions as the verdict was read. For Sue's family, it was a bittersweet moment, a sense of justice tempered by the knowledge that nothing could bring their son back. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a case that had captivated Taiwan and sparked widespread reflection on the nature of trust, manipulation, and vulnerability. Public sentiment was overwhelmingly against Lynn, with many viewing her as a calculating villain who showed no remorse for her actions. While Wei's actions were condemned, his story resonated with those who had experienced manipulation or unrequited love. Many saw him as a cautionary tale of how blind devotion can lead to devastating consequences. The case prompted discussions about emotional abuse, toxic relationships, and the importance of recognizing red flags in interpersonal dynamics. The trial of Lin Yanyi and Wei was more than a courtroom drama. It was a societal reckoning. It highlighted the dangers of manipulation, the importance of accountability, and the need for empathy and vigilance in the face of complex human relationships. The conviction of Lin Yanyi and Wei marked the end of one of Taiwan's most shocking criminal cases. But the ripples of their actions extended far beyond the courtroom. For Su Chie-heng's grieving family, for Wei's shattered life, and for a nation grappling with the dark truths of manipulation and betrayal, the aftermath was a mix of painful reflection and a search for meaningful change. For Sue's parents, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but could never erase the loss of their beloved son. Their grief was palpable, their voices shaking as they spoke about the lingering pain of losing the cornerstone of their family. "He was our pride and joy," Sue's father said during a memorial service. "We dreamed of watching him build a family of his own. Instead, we had to bury him." Despite Lynn's conviction, the family struggled to comprehend how someone they had welcomed with open arms could betray them so cruelly. "We treated her like a daughter," Sue's mother lamented. "How could she repay us with such evil?" In the wake of the trial, the family established a foundation in Sue's name to raise awareness about toxic relationships and manipulation. The initiative provided counseling and support for victims of emotional abuse, ensuring that Sue's legacy would be one of healing and hope. Wei's role in the murder left him with a heavy burden of guilt. But his remorse and cooperation with authorities earned him public sympathy. His story became a cautionary tale of how blind trust and emotional manipulation can lead to devastating consequences. Wei's reduced sentence gave him a chance at eventual freedom, but prison life was a stark reminder of the cost of his actions. Every day, I think about what I've done, he reportedly said in a letter to his family. I will never forgive myself. Wei's family, initially devastated by his involvement, began the slow process of reconciliation. His parents became vocal advocates for educating young people about the dangers of manipulation, using their son's story as an example. While some viewed Wei as a victim of Lin's cunning, others criticized him for failing to recognize the consequences of his actions. Love can blind us, one commentator wrote, but it can't excuse taking a life. The cyanide am case had already cast a shadow over Taiwan's sense of safety and trust. But the case of Lin and Wei added another layer of complexity. The nation began to reflect deeply on the societal factors that allowed such a tragedy to unfold. Public discourse shifted toward understanding the warning signs of toxic relationships. Counselors and psychologists were invited to TV programs and forums to educate the public on how to recognize manipulation, coercion, and emotional abuse. Advocacy groups used the case to highlight the importance of support systems for those in toxic relationships. Hotlines and shelters reported an increase in calls as individuals sought help to escape abusive dynamics. Lin's actions prompted conversations about societal expectations placed on women and the pressures to achieve material success. Her manipulative behavior was viewed by some as a symptom of deeper cultural issues, including the stigmatization of failure and the glorification of wealth. The trial and its aftermath became a media sensation, with news outlets and social media platforms analyzing every detail of the case. While the coverage ensured the public remained engaged, it also sparked debates about the ethics of sensationalizing such a tragic story. Several filmmakers and journalists produced in-depth documentaries and podcasts about the case, exploring its societal implications and providing a platform for Sue's family to share their story. Hashtags like #Justice for Sue and Lessons from Wei trended across platforms, sparking conversations about trust, accountability, and emotional resilience. Users shared personal stories of overcoming manipulation, creating a sense of collective healing. Some criticized the media for focusing too heavily on the drama of the trial rather than the broader issues it raised. This isn't entertainment, one columnist wrote. It's a tragedy that should make us reflect, not gossip. The case highlighted significant gaps in Taiwan's legal and social systems, prompting calls for reform to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Stricter sentencing for manipulative crimes. Lawmakers proposed harsher penalties for crimes involving coercion and manipulation, emphasizing the need to hold masterminds accountable for their actions. Schools began incorporating lessons on emotional intelligence and healthy relationships into their curricula, aiming to equip young people with the tools to recognize and resist manipulation. Funding for mental health services and support groups was increased, ensuring that individuals like Wei had access to resources before becoming entangled in destructive relationships. Despite the darkness surrounding his death, Su's life became a source of inspiration for many. Friends and family remembered him as a kind-hearted, hard-working man who always put others before himself. Through memorials and charitable initiatives, his legacy became a beacon of hope. A scholarship program was established to support underprivileged students pursuing careers in mechanics and engineering, reflecting Su's passion for his work. On the anniversary of his death, organizations held events to raise awareness about the dangers of manipulation and emotional abuse, ensuring that his story continued to inspire change. Su's story brought communities together, fostering a collective commitment to vigilance and empathy. "We can't change the past," a family friend said, "but we can honor Su by protecting others from suffering the same fate." The case of Lin and Wei serves as a haunting reminder of the power of manipulation and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. But it is also a story of resilience, reflection, and the enduring strength of those who refuse to let tragedy define them. This isn't just about one crime, a psychologist involved in the case said. It's about understanding how we can better protect ourselves and each other in a world where trust can be exploited. The shocking case of Lin Yanyi and Wei became more than just a story of betrayal and murder. It became a catalyst for change. The aftermath of their actions sparked intense conversations about manipulation, emotional abuse, and the societal norms that enable such tragedies. From legal reforms to cultural shifts, Taiwan grappled with the lessons of the case and sought ways to protect future victims. The trial exposed significant shortcomings in Taiwan's legal system, particularly regarding emotional manipulation and coercion. In response, lawmakers and advocacy groups pushed for reforms that would prevent similar crimes and ensure justice for future victims. For the first time, Taiwan's legal system began exploring how emotional manipulation could be treated as a form of abuse. Legislators proposed amendments to existing laws to include coercion, gaslighting, and other non-physical forms of harm as punishable offenses. New guidelines were introduced to impose harsher sentences for crimes involving manipulation or premeditation. These changes aim to hold perpetrators accountable for psychological as well as physical harm. The government increased funding for support services, including shelters, counseling, and legal aid for those in abusive or manipulative relationships. A new hotline was launched to provide immediate assistance to individuals experiencing emotional abuse or coercion. Beyond the courtroom, the case ignited a cultural reckoning. Taiwan's society began re-evaluating its understanding of trust, love, and the dangers of unchecked manipulation. Advocacy groups launched nationwide campaigns to educate the public about the warning signs of toxic relationships. Workshops, billboards, and social media ads emphasized red flags such as isolation, financial control, and emotional blackmail. The case highlighted the importance of mental health resources, not just for victims, but also for potential perpetrators like Wei, whose vulnerability made him an easy target. Schools and workplaces introduced mental health programs to promote emotional resilience and self-awareness. Lin's actions sparked debates about societal pressures on women to achieve material success and maintain appearances. Feminist organizations used the case to advocate for broader conversations about gender equality and dismantling harmful stereotypes. The media played a pivotal role in bringing the case to public attention, but its coverage was not without controversy. While the detailed reporting kept the public informed, it also raised ethical questions about the balance between awareness and sensationalism. Documentaries, podcasts, and news features delved deep into the case, providing context and exploring the psychological dynamics at play. These narratives educated audiences and ensured the lessons of the case reached a global audience. Hashtags like "East Manipulation Kills" and "Justice for Sue" trended for weeks, turning public outrage into a digital movement. Victims of emotional abuse shared their stories, creating a sense of solidarity and empowerment. Some commentators argued that the media's focus on the more lurid details of the case overshadowed its broader societal implications. "This isn't a soap opera," one editorial stated. "It's a tragedy that demands reflection, not voyeurism." One of the most significant outcomes of the case was the expansion of support systems for victims of manipulation and emotional abuse. Advocacy groups and government agencies collaborated to ensure that help was available for those in need. Free counseling programs were established to help individuals recognize and recover from toxic relationships. These services provided victims with tools to rebuild their self-esteem and regain control over their lives. Peer-led support groups offered safe spaces for survivors to share their experiences and find strength in one another. These groups became lifelines for individuals who had felt isolated and powerless. New helplines were launched to provide immediate assistance and guidance to individuals experiencing emotional abuse. These services were staffed by trained counselors who could offer practical advice and emotional support. The case of Lin and Wei resonated deeply with the public, uniting communities in a shared commitment to preventing similar tragedies. Grassroots movements and local organizations worked tirelessly to raise awareness and build a culture of vigilance. Community centers hosted events to educate residents about manipulation, emotional abuse, and healthy relationship dynamics. These workshops equipped attendees with the knowledge to protect themselves and their loved ones. Schools introduced programs on emotional intelligence and relationship skills, teaching students how to recognize unhealthy behaviors and assert their boundaries. These initiatives aim to foster a generation better equipped to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics. Local governments, NGOs, and private organizations joined forces to create comprehensive strategies for addressing emotional abuse. These partnerships ensured that resources and support were accessible to all, regardless of socioeconomic status. While the case of Lin and Wei is one of betrayal and tragedy, Sue's life and memory have become a source of inspiration. His story has been transformed into a beacon of hope and a call to action for a safer and more empathetic society. A scholarship fund was established to support students pursuing careers in Sue's field of mechanics, honoring his dedication to hard work and perseverance. On the anniversary of Sue's death, advocacy groups and community leaders held events to remember his life and promote awareness of manipulation and emotional abuse. For many, Sue's story represents the importance of standing against injustice and protecting those who cannot see the dangers they face. His legacy continues to inspire individuals to take action and create a more compassionate world. The case of Lin and Wei is more than a cautionary tale. It is a story of resilience, reform, and hope. While the tragedy cannot be undone, its impact has sparked meaningful change, ensuring that Sue's death was not in vain. We can't rewrite the past, a victim advocate said at a recent memorial. But we can honor Sue's life by creating a future where trust is sacred, manipulation is exposed, and justice prevails.